This is CNN, a network of Turner Broadcasting System.
Tonight on the Capitol Gang, the Iron Curtain opens for President Bush. A $500 million super bomber is set for takeoff, but will it fly? The HUD scandal takes a step up the ladder, and the French Revolution becomes a worldwide celebration. Now from Washington, the Capitol Gang.
You're talking deterrence. We're talking deterrence, not Welcome to the Capitol Gang. I'm Pat Buchanan with Mark Shields of the Washington Post, columnist Ben Wattenberg sitting in for Robert Novak, and Al Hunt of the Wall Street Journal. Our guest panelist, former Secretary of State Al Haig. Al, welcome back.
Thank you, Pat. It's good to be here.
Okay. Bush takes center stage. At week's end, President Bush arrived in Paris for the Economic Summit and the 200th anniversary of the fall of the Bastille. With Gorbachev back home in Moscow, it was Bush's week in the world spotlight. The president was hailed in Gdansk, birthplace of solidarity, where he celebrated the spirit of Polish independence.
To those who think that freedom can be forever denied, I say, let them look at Poland.
Well, Mr. Bush promised $125 million in new American aid and help in rolling over Poland's huge foreign debt. Lech Wałęsa's hopes for $10 billion in new capital seemed to be out of the question. In Budapest, the reception was even more enthusiastic, and Mr. Bush was presented a piece of barbed wire from the Iron Curtain that once separated Hungary from the West.
For the first time, the Iron Curtain has begun to part, and Hungary, your great country, is leading the way.
Is George Bush now taking the measure of Mikhail Gorbachev? Al Hunt.
Pat, if Robert Novak were here today, he no doubt would bring up my suggestion last week that Bush's visit would be the most emotional since an American president since JFK in '62. That's a prediction that fell flat in its face. George Bush proved once again that when it comes to charisma, he's no JFK and he's no Mikhail Gorbachev, as a matter of fact. I think the trip was in that sense disappointing to White House aides who thought there would be this incredible outpouring. Substantively, though, I think it was much more successful. I think that with some skill and sensitivity, he managed to walk that rope, that line between not offending the Soviets and also encouraging further liberalization economically and politically in Eastern Europe. It wasn't just the $125 million. He also, Jackson Vanik, he's going to get rid of Jackson Vanik for the Hungarians. He's going to extend some of the credit for the Poles. So I think all in all that it was a successful trip for this president. He doesn't have Gorbachev on the ropes, but now there's the reverse true.
Mark Shields.
Pat, it wasn't Mikhail Gorbachev that George Bush was being compared to this week. It was implicitly Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan's long shadow, his dramatic shadow, lay over George Bush's entire trip. First of all, the soul of the poet, which Reagan had, the ability to encapsulate the dramatic feelings of a moment, especially at South Korea, at the border, especially in Normandy, was missing. Al's absolutely right. It wasn't emotional. Gdansk was a natural. But the second part, and perhaps more significant, was the fact that George Bush can only bring $100 million. I mean, in the same week when the Japanese were offering $43 billion in economic aid, because of the budget deficits, because of the restraints, the United States can offer an example, a model, inspiration, right. But no, we got a case of the short.
The United States is all tapped out of money, or what?
Now, look, this trip, in my judgment, was a stunning success because what George Bush did is take the 4 television anchors to Eastern Europe and make this a top-level agenda item for the American people when when the threat of Soviet military expansion is apparently diminishing, and America has to move from an anti-Soviet posture to a pro-democracy posture. Bush dramatized that. You had all the television anchors. It sounded like you'll excuse the expression, a right-wing bias. Everybody denouncing 40 years of communist oppression. That's what Tom Brokaw said. 40 years of communist oppression. So he, better than George Bush looking good, he made America look good, he made the cause look good, and that's what a president has to do, is set the agenda, and he did it.
Al Haig, is this a triumph for George Bush or just a modest success?
I think an important success, not a triumph. There are clear divisions developing in Eastern Europe which are going to manifest themselves in the months ahead. Czechoslovakia, East Germany versus the Hungarian, Polish reform movement. This is going to translate into real trouble.
Al, look, does the United States really have the money to bail out Eastern Europe the way we funneled tens of billions of dollars that way during the détente decade?
No, and nor should we, even if we had that money. I think Mr. Bush was very correct in saying reform is the criteria to which the measurement for support is going to be controlled.
I agree with Al Haig on that. I think I'd be throwing money down a rat hole right now. Also, Mark, that $43 billion Japanese figure is really phony. Most of that are export credits, so these other countries can buy more Sonys and Toyotas. I mean, this is hardly.
But they're dealing in numbers that the United States can't approach.
Right, but Gorbachev didn't have a great session in Paris. He goes back home. Now they got coal strikes all over the country. I mean, how well is he doing?
Well, I think both guys play. It's interestingly politically. Bush played better in Gdansk and Budapest than he's apparently playing right now at Paris. And I think that it's interesting that both guys, outside their own spheres, outside their own political base, play better.
But the reason Gorbachev is doing so well is he's the only person in the world who's now allowed to call the Soviet Union an evil empire. He is saying all the things that Buchanan has been saying for the last 30 years. So sure, he's popular. But he's popular because he's saying we lost. We, the Soviets, lost. And so George Bush can just sit there and catch the apples as they come off the tree. He doesn't have to go mano-mano with them.
The important thing to remember on this whole trip and subsequent events is the fact that we're witnessing the failure of Marxist-Leninism. That's a historic fact. It's not a plus or a con or a pro or a minus for Bush or for Reagan.
But doesn't it look as though
it's a triumph of Western values?
And Gorbachev is making that
Ronald
case.
Reagan has been running the show for the last decade, and during that period, this triumph's occurred. Has Reagan given Bush the best handoff in history?
Well, I think history has given Reagan and Bush the best handoff in history. These are events that have been underway for 30 years, the failure of Marxist-Leninism. I spoke to it in the mid-'70s. It was inevitable. Now, it offers great opportunities, but if we go through phony euphoria or scorekeeping, Mark, if I may say, on who's doing the better job, then we're going to delude ourselves about the fundamental importance of these historic events.
Okay, the gang and Al Haig will be back with a gold-plated bomber called Stealth and big problems for the cabinet member they used to call Silent Sam.
It's ridiculous to own a car that only carries 2 people. There's sure not much room for luggage. And really, how often can you actually have the top down? Besides, think about what it does to your hair.
After you've gone through all the reasons not to buy an Alfa Romeo Spider, 2 compelling facts remain. It's summer, and it's an Alfa Romeo.
I used to take ibuprofen. Ibuprofen irritated my stomach sometimes. When I went to my doctor told me that Tylenol would not cause the stomach irritation that ibuprofen can. He recommended that I start using Tylenol, and I went to Tylenol. I got very good results. I got relief from my headache.
Debbie Eckert trusts Tylenol. Its pain reliever is in a class by itself.
I'm not going to experiment with any other types of pain relief medications.
At the biggest bank in Ireland, from coast to friendly coast, they'll refund your Visa traveler's checks if they're stolen or they're lost. So be off without a care and travel where you will, from McGillicuddy Reeks to Glencolmkill. But if you lose that other traveler's check, you may be in distress while you're phoning for a refund.
Thought you had the number.
From American Express. Visa traveler's checks, they're everywhere you want to be.
Subscribe to the Sporting News. You'll get 29 issues delivered to your mailbox for 4 payments of only $4.99. Call now 1-800-257-1257. That's 1-800-257-1257. The Sporting News.
Wise guy Ken Wall, Alan Funt who's angry, a Satanist turned comedian, and when is dating through the personal ads dangerous business? All that and more all next week on Larry King Live, 9 Eastern on CNN.
Welcome back. It's the most sophisticated warplane ever built, with a radar signature of a hummingbird and a sticker price of $520 million a copy. And it's a great plane, says Defense Secretary Dick Cheney, and we ought to buy it.
Now, I recognize sticker shock, but if you look at it from a historical perspective, it's not that unreasonable.
Do we really need $70 billion worth of new bombers, Mark Shields?
For those who missed the first segment of this show today, Pat, obviously not. The Cold War's over. The Soviets have lost. And ironically, this is what is undermining it. It's the price, because in the House Armed Services Committee, where Chairman Les Aspin failed by 1 vote and could risk his chairmanship by pushing a second vote on the Cheney budget, which includes the B-2. I think right now what has happened, the political reality is that on defense matters, there is no cohesiveness, and what it's become is it's like the Public Works Committee. You got your dam you want, and I want my bridge, and that's what it's become politically in the House, and I think that's the reality of the time.
Is that all it is, Al Haig?
Well, it's always been that. What's in it for me in the House? But I think this issue is very, very critical for the future of America's triad of strategic defenses. And clearly, this B-2 bomber, in which we put already $23 billion and now face another $40 billion, is essential to the maintenance of our strategic triad.
Al Hunt, it is only 3% of the defense budget for the next 5 years that they're asking to complete this and keep the manned bomber well into the 21st century. Why not?
Pat, that reminds me of Everett Dirksen. Used to say $1 billion here, $1 billion there, and pretty soon it's real money. This is the other, in addition to what Mark said, this is also the legacy of Al Haig's dear friend Cap Weinberger, who for the course of 8 years couldn't make any choices. Anything that moved, he purchased. And you have to have, by all accounts, this is a remarkable airplane, but we have to make choices now, and the only way it's going to get funded is if we want to kill some other things. And between the basically that's a congressional problem more than the Pentagon.
But Ben Wattenberg, it's a radar-evading weapon. It will make obsolete a $350 billion Soviet investment in air defense.
Mark Shields is right in characterizing what Secretary Haig and I have been saying, that the near-term threat from the Soviet Union is apparently diminished. But the B-2 is a long-term program, and you don't know what's going to happen 5 and 10 years down the road. So the answer is, usually a bad answer, because it costs more money per copy, is to stretch the thing out. You don't have the near-term problem that we had, but you don't know what's going to be happening in the 1990s. Stretch it out, pay a few more $1 trillion for it as worst of all worlds. Well, it's the
fund it or kill it. Dick Cheney's right.
No,
fund it or kill it.
Well, you know, that's too easy. Fund it or kill it. That's not the way the world works.
Well, the trouble is that the logic of a stretch out is just not there in this very difficult environment. And I think Cheney, who's going to be the star of this cabinet, has taken a very sound, courageous position.
All right, Al, one question. You know, they say, look, the United States can put 12,000, 10,000 nuclear warheads on the Soviet Union with missiles. What do we need a bomber to be able to put 2,000 more?
Well, this is the only strategic system which has the potential, not the reality, but the potential of handling mobile targets in the Soviet Union. And as we watch Soviet defenses and air defenses, the sophisticated development of them, it's clearly essential to the maintenance of our deterrent.
Quick last word, Mark.
Dick Cheney put it well. It better fly.
Okay. The HUD secretary they used to call Silent Sam Pierce is going to have to do some talking to the House committee investigating the HUD scandal. On May 25th, Pierce denied he ever pressured his aides to fund housing projects. But yesterday, former aide Shirley Wiseman contradicted her old boss.
I never told any of these people to fund anything.
I said, I can't fund it, Mr. Secretary. And he said, well, I want it funded. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't fund it, but I will send it upstairs to you.
Ms. Weissman, your testimony is very frankly devastating.
Is this HUD scandal headed for a grand jury, Al Hunt?
You know, it may be, Pat. I think as Jill Abramson and Ed Pound of our paper have amply demonstrated, it's not just this Durham, North Carolina project where Secretary Pierce personally intervened. In a number of projects, he personally intervened. There's already talk about perjury as far as Secretary Pierce and others are concerned. You know, it's a personal tragedy. Here was a man, the son of a locker room attendant, who rose really to great prestige. He was a very distinguished lawyer, and he took a job that he shouldn't have taken. He wasn't qualified for. He was picked as a token. He ended up as Secretary of HUD, watching soap operas, working 10 to 4. It really is a personal tragedy to all
Al
this.
Haig, are they going to make your old cabinet colleague the big enchilada in the HUD scandal?
Well, it's very possible, given yesterday's developments. I hope it doesn't occur. But it's, again, a reflection of hands-on management and the failure of hands-on management over the last 8 years.
You know, Mark, this really does say something that some of the Republicans and the conservatives in the Reagan Revolution came here to do more than do good. but to do well for themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure they came to do good. I think you're giving them a little moral high ground there, Pat. But I'll tell you this. I mean, this is garden variety greed is what this HUD thing is all about. And what you're seeing now is that marvelous stage in any scandal called the Civil War in the leper colony, right? I mean, the recriminations and the cross accusations are
Everybody
going on.
save himself.
And the strange, that's right. And the strangest silence of all is that of Newt Gingrich, the Republican House Whip. You remember Newt said that the road to Republican majority in the country was going to be by attacking Democratic corruption. Now, this kind of just undermines Newt's whole political strategy. How about it, Pat?
What do you think, Ben?
Well, I think on the lobbyist side, you know, Democrats, Republicans, everybody, that's the culture of Washington. You work on a committee, you pass a program, then you go work for a corporation to navigate around the shoals of it. But I'll tell you, there's something else that's very interesting here, is where was the press? The press was sitting around for 8 years making fun of this as Stealthy Sam, Silent Sam, sort of a running gag, and that agency was being systematically ravaged out in the field. People just, I'm not talking about the lobbyists now, the people out in the field just stealing money by wheelbarrows full, and people were making jokes about Silent Sam Pierce. Where's the investigative press corps when you need him? Your fault.
There's criticism for the press here, there's criticism of congressional oversight, a failure of it, but in the final analysis, you've got greed.
We'll be back with bad blood between Jesse Jackson and Marion Barry, and Ed Koch puts on his running shoes. Later, the outrages of the week.
Who doesn't recognize the unmistakable music of Bonanza, the series that became a Sunday night tradition for millions of American families? And who can forget the Cartwrights, the frontier family that shaped a television legacy? Now you can go back to the Ponderosa on video cassette with Bonanza, the collector's edition from CBS Video Library. Relive the sagas of TV's first rich and powerful dynasty. There's Ben, the proud patriarch, driven by hardship, ambition, and a father's love.
I've never held my land above my sons.
Adam, Haas, and Little Joe, his devoted but vastly different sons, bound by the land and their kinship. Call now and get 2 great episodes on one video cassette for only $4.95 when you subscribe to Bonanza, the collector's edition. Every episode in this collection is in full color, uncut, and without commercials. See special guest performances by stars like Yvonne DiCarlo in the premiere episode that launched Bonanza. Telly Savalas as a ruthless land baron out to add to his empire.
Mr. Cartwright, everything is for sale. Just name your price.
And other top stars appearing on Bonanza often before they made it big. Get your first cassette for only $4.95 on a 10-day risk-free preview. Keep it, and about every 4 to 6 weeks, another cassette arrives with 2 more Bonanza adventures on the same 10-day risk-free preview basis. Keep only the cassettes you want. There is no minimum number to buy, and you can cancel anytime. So come home to the Ponderosa. Call now to bring Bonanza, the collector's edition, into your home. Call the number on your screen today and get your first video cassette of Bonanza, the collector's edition, for only $4.95. If you're not satisfied, return it within 10 days for a full refund. There's no risk, so call now.
Welcome back. With Jesse Jackson packing to move to Washington to set himself up for a run at the mayor's job, the embattled incumbent, Marion Barry, put out word he will run himself for a 4th term. A clash between the 2 national black leaders and old friends now seems inevitable. Who's going to win this face-off and become your next mayor, Ben Wattenberg?
I think Jesse Jackson is the front runner. The chances of his actually being mayor of Washington, I have calculated precisely, are 33.3%. And on this logic, the chances that he will decide to run, are 50-50. And if he runs, his chances of winning are only 2 to 1, which is pretty good. But there's a lot of anti-Jackson sentiment in this community, including the black community. If you take 1/2 of 2/3, you get 1/3. He's the front runner, but only with a 1 3
Choice of Jesse Jackson and Marion.
Yes, sir. Hey, bang!
Look, a choice of Jesse Jackson and Marion Barry. Is that a choice of executioners or what here, Mark?
I think it's a choice of urban leadership. I say that as a resident of the district. What Marion Barry did was to send publicly a very private message to Jesse Jackson. That was, Jesse, you want to come in and run, okay, you're going to lose the moral high ground. You're not going to be able to come in.
You mean Marion Barry's got the moral high ground in Washington, D.C.?
No, the message was there's no vacancy here. You're going to have to come in and beat me, a guy who supported you and so forth, and I think that's the message that was sent. It makes it more difficult, I think, for Jesse Jackson to come in as a candidate of acclamation.
Okay. If Jesse does come in, Pat, and I think the odds are better than 50-50 that he will run, he's going to win in a walk. I heard the same thing in primaries in '84 in Birmingham, Detroit, Philadelphia. If Jesse runs, there'll be problems with the local body. He'll run over it. Mark's right, he'll lose some of the high ground. The biggest impediment to Jesse Jackson running is not a discredited Marion Barry, but an ingenious scheme passed by the city council, which would severely limit honoraria that any mayor can take. Now, that hits Jesse in his pocketbook.
Because of the speech. Al Higgs, do you think we're going to see Jesse here as mayor of Washington, D.C.?
I think Jesse will have second thoughts when he looks at the long-term implications of it to him.
You do? I'm inclined to think he's going to come in and do it. It gives him a huge power base and stay up all the rest of it. He's not going to like the honoraria restraint, but
it's a tough
why
race.
Is he moving here otherwise?
Well, because Chicago's no good for him. The media center is here. The Rainbow Coalition will do better here than in Chicago. There are a lot of good reasons for him to move to Washington. It's going to be a tough race. I mean, he has got to renounce. He's got to say he will not run in 1992, or he's going to be slammed by everybody, and he hasn't said that yet.
Meanwhile, up in Manhattan, Mayor Ed Koch has made it official. He is going for a fourth term.
I'm running. I'm running.
With only 8 weeks before the primary, Koch has a negative rating of almost 50% and is 12 points behind in the run for the Democratic nomination, even further behind front-running Republican Rudy Giuliani. Is this the last hurrah for Ed Koch, Mark Shields?
The kinder, gentler Ed Koch is how they're trying to run him. They've got a real problem right now in New York, the Koch people do. And ideally what you want to do is run for re-election by running the high road. This is what we've done. This is what we've done for the city. Give us another term, we'll finish the job. What Ed Koch, with that 50% unfavorable rating you mentioned, Pat, is forced to do in a campaign strategy is to say, look, I'm no day at the beach, but the other guy's no month in the country. So he's got to run, of necessity, a negative campaign. Ed Koch is certainly up to running a negative campaign.
Ben?
It is a very good rule in Gotham not to underestimate Ed Koch. He has confounded the critics again and again. You're all right, he's running behind in the polls, but you know, there was a mayor in New York City, Robert Wagner, who was in a somewhat similar position some decades ago. He was the incumbent, and he decided to run against the establishment. Now, he was the establishment, but it didn't... and I think that's what Koch is going to do. Say, all these guys are out to mug me, all these organizations are out to get me, and little old me, I saved the city, help me, and he's not going to be a bad campaign.
This Manhattan Borough President Dinkins is 12 points up. He is sitting on his lead. He is freezing the ball, and Koch is a mover. What do you think, Al?
Well, Koch says God has more in mind for him, and that may be the case.
God has not finished me yet. God has not finished with me yet.
Well, Ben's right. You can't underestimate Eddie. I first met Eddie when he was a reformed Democrat taking on Carmine DeSapio. So, I mean, Eddie can change a lot. Eddie's got one problem, though. He's had a great scam for about 12 years in which he's convinced the voters of New York City that he's one of us. And he's fighting against those faceless and corrupt bureaucrats, who screw up your education and your garbage. The problem is that after 12 years now, New Yorkers have met the enemy, and it's Eddie.
Okay. Al, thanks for being with us. The gang will be back with the outrage of the week.
Of course you're expecting someone else. Here's news you weren't expecting. Remarkable sterling savings. Like a low $399 lease with no down payment through July 31st on the dramatic sterling 827 SLI.
Of the thousands of insurance companies in America today, only one serves veterans exclusively. Veterans Life Insurance Company. If you're a veteran aged 30 to 69 with a family, a home, or saving for retirement, call this number now to see how Veterans Life can serve you.
Roger Staubach for Veterans Life.
Our families are the most important part of our lives. We want them to be secure and well protected. That's why veterans like us need good, solid life insurance. At Veterans Life, you get the kind of coverage you need at a price you can afford. I've had my policy with them for years. The people are great. You get straight answers, and they pay claims fast. Isn't that what insurance is all about? You bet it is.
Veterans, call 1-800-453-5600 for free life insurance information, plus this guide to veterans benefits. That's 1-800-453-5600.
Veterans get special treatment at Veterans Life, and you won't find that anywhere else. So call now.
Sunday, President Bush speaks out as the 15th summit of the world's leading industrial nations comes to an end. It's a presidential news conference live from Paris on CNN, 12:30 Eastern Sunday.
Now the outrage of the week. He is the Marco Polo of the Imperial Congress, a Democrat from Brooklyn who spent 4 months of the last Congress traveling abroad at your expense. He is Stephen Solarz, the greatest of the junketeers, and he took 11 trips overseas in 24 months, only 4 of them in areas covered by his committee. Steve, your Capitol Gang's Man of the Week. Ben?
The outrage of the week is the Senate immigration bill. America needs a bold, new, legal immigration policy that lets in people with skills, that establishes a new stream of immigrants from Europe, from both Eastern and Western Europe. We're not letting in Poles, we're not letting in Hungarians, without cutting back on the existing streams. The Senate has passed a milquetoast, unimaginative bill, and the House better rectify it and start looking ahead to the 1990s when we're going to face this labor shortage and this customer shortage, and the Senate didn't do it.
Al Hunt.
Attorney General Richard Thornburg is vocally championing a constitutional amendment to overturn the Supreme Court's flag-burning decision. Now, that hardly puts him in unique company, as you know, Pat. Right. There's one difference. When the issue came before the court, Mr. Thornburg's own Justice Department didn't think it was important enough to even file a brief. That suggests the Attorney General may be playing politics with this constitutional issue.
No.
Pat, Norman Douglas once wrote, you can tell the ideals of a nation by its advertising. No better example of this is provided than on sale in Washington, D.C. is the most sacred symbol of Christianity, the crucifix, and the rush for a quick buck. They take this sacred symbol of Christianity and market it with the offensive language like strong fashion message, like a rabbit's foot, inspired look, strong fashion message, and so forth. Pat, this is outrageous, it's indefensible, and it's a trivialization of religion.
Okay. I'm Pat Buchanan saying good night for the Capitol Gang.